Imagine this. A teenager rolls up to court in a car worth more than most people's homes, and from the very first second, he mocks everyone around him. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and the sound of polished shoes echoed against the tiled floor. A boy of 17 entered as if he owned the room. The fitted designer suit looked like it had never seen a wrinkle, and the glow of his phone lit his face. He didn't bother lifting his eyes toward the bench. To him, the courtroom was background noise, a stage he hadn't asked for, but would gladly hijack. People in the gallery turned their heads, whispering. The car he had parked outside, a gleaming sports machine with a license plate that drew stares, had already sparked murmurs before the hearing began. Now the driver himself made it clear the arrogance didn't stop with the vehicle. Judge Caprio's tone was polite, almost fatherly. "Do you understand why you're here today?" The boy chuckled, his thumb still scrolling. "Your Honor, I didn't even pay for this car. My dad takes care of everything." The room shifted instantly. A woman in the back leaned toward her neighbor, muttering in disbelief. Two men in worn jackets shook their heads in unison. You could feel the weight of judgment settling in, not from the court, but from the people who had come expecting routine cases about expired meters or broken tail lights. The judge straightened his glasses. His voice hardened. "This is not a stage for entertainment, young man. This is about responsibility." Responsibility? The boy finally looked up, eyes bright with mischief. "I've had dozens of tickets already. So what? We just pay them." The casual admission sucked the air from the room. One older woman pressed her palm to her chest as though she'd been struck. The boy leaned back in his chair, lifted his phone, and turned the screen so everyone nearby could see. On it was a photograph of a crowded party. Lights blazed, drinks in hand, and right in the center, he posed with two fingers raised in triumph. His caption was clear: "Beat the cops again." The judge's face didn't flinch, but his voice cut like a blade. "Do you realize your parents are paying for your recklessness, not only in dollars, but in reputation?" The boy smirked. "They don't care." A murmur of outrage rolled through the gallery, louder this time. Elderly women whispered furiously, men folded their arms, the atmosphere pressing tight around the boy, who still sat casually slouched. The judge leaned forward. "This court deals with more than parking tickets. It deals with people's lives. And right now, yours is sliding toward a wall you don't even see." But the boy only grinned wider, basking in the attention. To him, the rising tension wasn't a warning. It was fuel. The moment hung heavy, an ordinary citation transforming into a public reckoning. The contrast was stark. A trivial fine on paper, yet in reality, a mirror of entitlement so brazen it made the room boil. And that was only the beginning. The judge folded his hands and let the silence linger until even the boy shifted in his chair. Then, with a calm edge, he asked, "Tell me about yourself. What kind of life do you live when you're not collecting tickets?" The teenager smirked, as though the question were beneath him. "My dad builds towers downtown. My mom runs investments. We travel. We buy things. That's my life." "So you've never worked a day? Never earned your own dollar?" The boy tilted his head, eyes flashing with amusement. "Work? Why would I? We're not poor." The line sparked nervous laughter from a few in the gallery, but most sat stone-faced. A man near the back muttered under his breath, shaking his head at the arrogance on display. The judge's voice was even but sharp. "Privilege without effort is a dangerous lesson." The boy leaned forward, eager now to flaunt. "Dangerous? I've outrun squad cars before. Made a bet with my friends who could rack up the most fines. I'm winning." Whispers burst across the room. Mothers in the audience looked at one another with disbelief. A retired officer in the second row shifted uncomfortably, jaw tightening. From the defense table, his mother suddenly stood. She was dressed immaculately, her jewelry catching the courtroom lights. "Your Honor," she began smoothly, "this is being blown out of proportion. He's only a teenager. These are childish stunts. Nothing more." Judge Caprio turned his gaze on her, his expression turning colder. "Madam, reckless driving is not a prank. Your son risks lives every time he takes the wheel. And the way you dismiss it tells me where he learned his disregard." Her lips tightened, but she sat down, eyes darting away. The boy, emboldened by the exchange, laughed. "See? Even she knows it's nothing serious." The judge fixed him with a stare. "Do you understand that your so-called games place others in danger? Do you understand that behind every statistic of reckless driving, there are names, faces, families torn apart?" The boy shrugged, shoulders loose. "Other people aren't my problem." A wave of disapproval surged through the gallery. A woman in her 70s whispered to the man beside her, "That could have been my grandson on the road." He nodded grimly. The judge didn't move, but his voice dropped an octave. "You are not only breaking traffic laws, you are eroding the very trust your community should have in the next generation." The boy's smirk faltered just a fraction, but he quickly masked it with another laugh. "Trust? I don't need anyone's trust. My dad can fix anything." The gallery reacted again, louder this time. Some shook their heads, others exchanged knowing looks as if the pattern was too familiar. Money cushioning consequence. But the atmosphere had shifted. What began as a boy bragging about tickets was morphing into a broader portrait. An upbringing soaked in indulgence, a family willing to excuse, and a teenager who viewed the world not as a place of shared rules, but as a playground where nothing stuck. The judge allowed the discontent in the room to settle before speaking again. "Your story is not one of youthful mistakes, but of cultivated entitlement. You've turned your violations into trophies, your recklessness into a contest. And that will end here." The boy smirked once more, but a shadow passed across his expression, brief and uncertain. The crowd leaned forward. Something heavier was taking shape. This was no longer about traffic citations. It was about a system tested, a community provoked, and the fragile line between privilege and accountability. And that line was about to snap. The judge tapped a finger on the stack of files at his side. "Let's stop circling. Bring me the record of every violation from the last 6 months." The clerk slid a folder forward, pages thick with citations. Caprio spread them across the bench. Numbers leapt from the paper. Fines, dates, codes, officer notes. His brow furrowed. Over $15,000 in penalties, all in half a year. The boy lounged as if bored. "So what? I like driving fast. If you've got money, why should it matter?" Gasps rolled through the room. A man in the gallery muttered, "Tell that to the people you put at risk." His neighbor hushed him, but the anger was palpable. The judge held up one sheet. "This isn't just about speed. Here, Route 95, midnight. A collision. Someone was injured. You were cited at the scene." The boy tilted his head, feigning thought. "Honestly? I don't even remember that night." A ripple of outrage traveled the benches. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You don't remember an accident that put someone in the hospital?" Before the boy could answer, a uniformed officer stepped forward. "Your Honor, I was there." He laughed when we pulled him over. Told us, "My lawyer will crush you in court." We filed it exactly as it happened. The gallery erupted in whispers. Elderly women shook their heads. A retired man in the front row whispered, He's mocking the system itself. But the sharpest revelation came as the judge scanned the registration forms. His voice slowed, deliberate. This car, the one outside today, the one in half these reports, it isn't registered to you. It isn't in your father's name or your mother's. He lifted the page higher. It's registered to your grandmother. The boy stiffened, the first break in his swagger. She signed the papers. It's no big deal. Murmurs surged louder than before. A woman in the gallery clutched her scarf, whispering, "She probably had no idea." The judge's tone cut through the noise. "Are you telling this court that your grandmother knowingly assumed responsibility for a sports car valued higher than her home? That she understood she was listed as owner of a vehicle used in repeated criminal violations?" The boy looked down at his phone, avoiding the eyes fixed on him. "She doesn't care about that stuff." The weight of the words landed hard. The gallery split between disbelief and fury. Half stunned that a teenager could hide behind an elderly relative, half seething at the thought of exploiting her. The judge leaned forward, voice steady but dangerous in its calm. "Young man, this isn't a problem of money. It's a problem of character. You treat danger as a game, your family as a shield, and the law as a joke. That ends here." For the first time, the boy didn't laugh. He cleared his throat, a nervous sound cutting through the silence. The room stilled, every eye fixed on him. What began as a routine hearing had transformed into something else entirely. Not a tally of fines, but an unfolding drama of arrogance, recklessness, and hidden family secrets. And the next step would drag that secret into the open. Judge Caprio's hand paused mid-air, the registration form still between his fingers. He looked over the rim of his glasses. "If this vehicle is in your grandmother's name, then she deserves a voice. Bailiff, bring her in." The doors opened slowly. An elderly woman stepped forward with the aid of a cane, her frame slight, shoulders drawn as if bracing against a storm. Her shoes tapped quietly across the floor, each step amplified by the stillness in the room. She lowered herself into the witness chair with effort. Her eyes, pale and tired, drifted toward the boy. For a moment, her mouth trembled as if words were too heavy to carry. The judge leaned gently. "Madam, did you know you are listed as owner of this car?" Her head moved side to side. "I had no idea, Your Honor. He handed me papers and said they were for taxes. I trusted him. He's my grandson." A low groan passed through the gallery. Men shifted uncomfortably. Women shook their heads. The boy shot up, face flushed. "She doesn't remember. She's old. She gets confused. She'll sign anything." The room erupted in sharp whispers. The grandmother turned to him, voice breaking. "You told me it was just a form. You said you needed help." Her cane rattled against the floor as she steadied herself. "I even gave him money from my pension when he said the government was after us. Month after month. I thought I was protecting the family." The judge's jaw tightened. "Are you telling this court that a luxury vehicle was financed under your grandmother's name, with her retirement funds paying the bills?" She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't know it was for a car. I never even saw it until today." The boy snapped, his bravado faltering into open hostility. "She's exaggerating. You people are acting like this is a crime. It's not that serious." Caprio's palm slammed the bench. "Not that serious. You manipulated an elderly woman into debt. You concealed the purchase of a high-end car and used her as a shield for your recklessness. That is not immaturity. That is fraud." Gasps filled the room. The boy's mother buried her face in her hands. A man in the gallery muttered, It's beyond arrogance now. It's cruelty. The grandmother sobbed quietly. I trusted him because he's my blood. I thought family meant safety. Her words cut deeper than any legal argument. The gallery was transfixed, not by the boy's entitlement, but by the visible wound of betrayal etched across the face of a woman who had raised him. The judge's voice hardened. Young man, your behavior is no longer a question of poor judgment. It is the deliberate exploitation of kinship. This court does not turn a blind eye when trust is weaponized against the vulnerable. The boy, cornered yet defiant, crossed his arms. My dad will handle it. You can't touch me. The judge leaned forward, voice firm as stone. This proceeding is not about your father's influence. It is about you. And from this moment forward, you will be treated not as a careless teenager, but as a participant in deception that harmed your own grandmother. The gavel struck once. This hearing will recess. When we resume, we will examine the financial trail that ties this vehicle to her name. If there is evidence of intentional misrepresentation, it will be pursued as criminal fraud. The gallery buzzed with disbelief, outrage, and pity all at once. Some clapped softly for the grandmother's courage. Others shook their heads at the boy's venomous words. As she was helped from the stand, her whisper carried through the silence. I never thought he could do this to me. And for the first time, the boy's smirk collapsed. When the court reconvened, the tension felt heavier, as though every person in the gallery carried a piece of the grandmother's grief. Judge Caprio's voice was clipped, all courtesy stripped away. We will now examine the financial records tied to this case. Clerk, bring forward the bank statements. The attorney for the boy rose at once, polished words ready. Your Honor, this is an unnecessary invasion of privacy. The judge cut him off, eyes blazing. Privacy is not a shield for exploitation. Sit down. The pages were handed across. Numbers leapt from the columns, deposits small and steady, withdrawals large and irregular. Caprio flipped through, his expression darkening. Pension checks deposited, immediately followed by transfers to rental agencies, liquor suppliers, and gambling websites, all under her account. The grandmother sat hunched, wringing a handkerchief. I didn't know where the money went. He said it was for bills I couldn't understand. The judge pressed on. And here, payments to luxury apartment complexes. Did you live in these residences? Her eyes filled with bewilderment. No, sir. I've lived in the same house for 40 years. The courtroom erupted. Someone in the gallery exclaimed, He bled her dry for parties. The bailiff barked for order, but the outrage could not be smothered. Caprio lifted another sheet. One more violation appears in these files. A ticket for street racing at 2 a.m. The evidence includes a recording. The screen flickered to life. A shaky video, pulled from social media, filled the courtroom. The boy behind the wheel, laughing into the camera, shouting over the roar of the engine, I do whatever I want. Money makes it disappear. The sound of his own voice, amplified in this solemn chamber, rattled the illusion of control he clung to. Then a new voice spoke up. From the second row, a neighbor of the grandmother raised her hand. Your Honor, I need to testify. I've seen collection agents come to her door. They shouted, threatened. She was terrified. The old woman covered her face, trembling. I didn't want to shame the family. I kept quiet. Caprio's gaze sharpened. Shame lies not with you, but with the one who put you in this position. He turned toward the boy. Your grandmother endured harassment because you turned her savings into your bankroll. Even the defense attorney looked pale, papers trembling in his grip. The judge reached the insurance forms next. He studied them, then said flatly, "These documents claim the driver of the vehicle is a middle-aged man with decades of experience. A fabrication. Whoever filled this out committed forgery." The gallery broke into gasps. A woman cried out, "That's a felony!" Another muttered, "And he sits there smiling." Caprio's hand clenched the file. His voice rose. "You robbed an elderly woman not only of money but of peace. You stripped her of dignity so you could play games with horsepower and adrenaline." The grandmother's quiet sobs filled the room. I stayed silent because I thought family mattered more than anything. But silence gave him power. I see that now. Something shifted in the gallery. Applause broke out. Short, fierce claps from strangers who admired her courage to speak aloud at last. The boy looked cornered, his arrogance cracking as eyes bore into him from every side. For the first time, his phone lay untouched on the table. Caprio leaned forward, voice like steel. "We are no longer discussing tickets or youthful recklessness. We are dissecting a pattern of deceit, documented in black and white. And I will not allow you to walk out of here untouched." The room was electric, every spectator locked in the same thought. This was no longer about a spoiled teenager's antics. It was the unveiling of betrayal and the slow march toward reckoning. The courtroom was silent when Judge Caprio returned. His robe seemed heavier, his expression carved from stone. He settled behind the bench and spoke slowly, every syllable carrying weight. "This is no longer a traffic case. What unfolded here reveals deliberate fraud, exploitation of an elder, and a callous disregard for human life. I will render my decision now." The boy slouched, arms folded, but his eyes darted nervously. His mother stared at the floor, unable to look at anyone. The grandmother sat upright despite her frailty, her hands folded tightly in her lap, as though bracing for whatever storm remained. Caprio raised the stack of documents. "The fines and citations pale compared to what has been uncovered. You forged signatures, concealed ownership, drained accounts, and left your grandmother exposed to harassment and humiliation. That is not mischief. It is calculated abuse." A murmur ran through the gallery. People leaned forward, hungry for the outcome. The judge continued. "Effective immediately. The vehicle registered under your grandmother's name will be seized. All financial contracts tied to her will be voided pending investigation. This court will refer the matter to the district attorney for charges of fraud and elder exploitation." The boy snapped upright, his voice cracking. "You can't do that! My father will crush this." The judge's gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. "Enough! In this courtroom, money does not eclipse justice. Sit down." The boy froze, face paling. Caprio turned to the grandmother, his tone softening. "Madam, the law failed you when it allowed this burden to reach your doorstep. Today, that changes. Your accounts will be safeguarded, your debts investigated, and your role in these violations erased." Tears spilled down her cheeks. For the first time, her voice steadied. "Thank you, Your Honor. I only wanted the truth to be seen." The gallery erupted in applause, not polite, but raw and fervent. Strangers who had watched in outrage now stood in respect, clapping for the frail woman who had carried silence until it nearly destroyed her. The boy, cornered at last, sank back into his chair. His smirk was gone, replaced by the vacant stare of someone who had never imagined consequence reaching this far. The judge delivered the final words with solemnity. "This hearing began with what seemed a minor offense. It ends with a reminder that justice is not measured in dollars or excuses. It is measured in accountability. And accountability has found you today." The gavel came down one final time. The grandmother was helped to her feet. She paused, leaning on her cane, and looked at her grandson, not with hatred, but with a sorrow so profound it silenced even the whispers. "I raised you to know better. You chose this path. Now you must walk it alone." Her words lingered as she left the chamber, a fragile figure whose dignity, though wounded, remained unbroken. The crowd parted for her, some reaching out to squeeze her hand, others bowing their heads in respect. Behind her, the boy sat trapped, the weight of his choices settling like chains he could no longer shake. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the story had already spread. In every hushed conversation, in every glance exchanged, one truth was clear. This was not about fines or speed, not about privilege or bravado. It was about the line between family and betrayal, and the courage of an old woman who finally spoke the truth. And though the boy's future would now be decided in higher courts, one verdict was already etched into the memory of everyone present. Arrogance had met its limit, and justice had stood its ground.